In our headlines on this Monday, October 7th. President Yoon Suk-yeol and his counterpart, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., sat down for a summit Monday afternoon over in Manila, where they agreed to elevate their bilateral relationship to a strategic partnership. And Israel marks a solemn anniversary of the brutal assault against its people on October 7th last year by the Palestinian militant group Hamas that took the lives of over 1,200 people. Meanwhile, North Korea and China commemorate the 75th anniversary of their diplomatic relations with messages by their leaders as well as top diplomats pledging stronger cooperation. We start over in Manila today, where the presidents of South Korea and the Philippines have pledged a strategic partnership to mark their 75th anniversary of diplomatic ties this year. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon, who is part of the traveling press pool, files this report.
South Korea and the Philippines are now strategic partners. This as President Yoon Suk-yeol made a state visit hosted by the Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and held a summit at the Malacanang Palace on Monday.
저는 이번 방문을 통해 필리핀이 마르코스 대통령님의 지도력 하에 역동적으로 발전하고 있으며 양국 관계가 무한한 발전 가능성을 가지고 있음을 확인했습니다. 오늘 저와 마르코스 대통령님은 양국 간 전략적 동반자 관계를 수립하여 한국과 필리핀의 관계에 새로운 장을 열었습니다.
During our fruitful bilateral meetings, President Yoon and I covered several areas of cooperation, including defense and security, maritime cooperation, economic and development cooperation, and people-to-people exchanges. We agreed that we have made significant strides in advancing and deepening our bilateral cooperation towards the attainment of our mutually beneficial goals.
This is the first state visit by a South Korean president in 13 years. The two nations have a deeply rooted bilateral relationship. The Philippines was the fifth nation South Korea established diplomatic relations with, and this year the two nations mark 75th anniversary of the establishment of those ties. The two leaders adopted a joint statement to specify what the new level of relationship will look like. The detailed document listed specific cooperation beginning with political relations to cooperation in security, economy, and civilian exchanges. The two leaders, among many different aspects to a detailed plan of action, highlighted security cooperation amid the two nations needing international support for their current situations. South Korea faces North Korea's provocations. Philippines has been in contention with China over maritime borders. Yoon emphasized solidarity in the rule of international law.
이러한 차원에서 양국은 남중국 해상 규칙에 기반한 해양 질서의 확립과 국제법 원칙에 따른 항행 및 상공 비행의 자유를 위해 계속 협력해 나아가기로 했습니다.
While the Philippines leader acknowledged solidarity against North Korea's provocation and support for Seoul's efforts to denuclearize and make peace on the Korean peninsula.
I welcome the Republic of Korea's efforts to promote peace and stability in the Korean peninsula. The audacious initiative and the August 15 unification doctrine are important efforts in this regard.
In addition, the two leaders agreed to expand the size of joint military exercises, while South Korea's defense industry will support the Philippines' efforts to modernize its military further. Meanwhile, the top office says as South Korea will establish a comprehensive strategic partnership with the ASEAN when Yoon arrives in Laos for a summit in a few days. Elevating the ties with individual members like this is crucial. President Yoon is set to stop by Singapore from Monday to Wednesday before getting to Laos for the summit this week. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, Manila.
Also in Manila, as indication of their intentions to bolster ties, Seoul and Manila have sealed a substantial number of MOUs to advance infrastructure projects, critical mineral procurement, and more. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young has more.
South Korea and the Philippines inked deals to cooperate on national infrastructure, critical mineral supply chains, and possibly nuclear energy as the two countries upgraded their relations to a strategic partnership. During President Yoon's state visit to the Philippines, 20 memorandums of understanding were signed between the two countries' governments and businesses on Monday, enhancing their trade ties to a sustainable win-win relationship. As the two governments agreed on South Korean firms participating in major infrastructure projects, including a highway in the Laguna Lake area and an offshore bridge, Seoul will provide low-interest loans to the Philippines to help facilitate the projects under the Economic Cooperation Development Fund.
이 두 사업은 지원 규모가 각각 10억 불 상당으로 대외경제협력기금 EDCF 사업 기준 역대 1, 2위의 대형 개발 협력 사업이며 한국 기업들이 중추적인 역할을 할 것입니다. 아울러 양국은 필리핀이 추진 중인 여러 인프라 사업에 세계적인 경험과 역량을 갖춘 한국 기업들의 참여를 확대해 나아가기로 했습니다.
South Korea will also grant further loans to resume the second phase of a highway construction project. Additionally, Seoul and Manila's trade ministry signed an MOU to ramp up cooperation on procuring critical minerals. The two sides will strengthen information exchange on key material investments and provide mutual support in the case of supply chain disruptions, as well as expand joint research and development for mining and refining. As of 2023, the Philippines is the world's sixth largest producer of nickel and cobalt, key materials that power all things digital and future-oriented industries. Nuclear power cooperation is also on the cards, as Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power will conduct a feasibility study to resume the construction of Bataan nuclear power plant, which has been stalled since 1986. The two sides will also seek to foster a production complex for Korean agricultural machinery to help the Philippines ramp up food security. At a business forum on Monday afternoon, some 300 corporate leaders and government officials participated, including the chiefs of Samsung Korean Air and Hana Aerospace, along with Presidents Yoon and Ferdinand Marcos Jr., with 13 business MOUs signed to promote airline cooperation, smart city development, energy production and military equipment exports to the Philippines. Such deals follow the two countries' free trade agreement signed in Jakarta last year, which will remove Philippine tariffs on 96.5% of goods from South Korea and Korean tariffs on 94.8% of Philippine products. The FTA will take effect after it is ratified by the South Korean National Assembly. Hwaseong, Arirang News.
Today, that is October 7th, marks the one-year anniversary of the appalling assault on Israel by Hamas. And in light of the solemn occasion, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reaffirmed his commitment to military retaliation against militant groups in Gaza and Lebanon. Our Yoon has the latest.
On Sunday, ahead of the one-year anniversary of the outbreak of war in Gaza on October 7th, Israel launched an intense bombardment on the Lebanese capital Beirut, the heaviest since the start of Israel's campaign against the militant group Hezbollah last month. Israel has also declared 3 northern regions bordering Lebanon, Manara, Iftah, and Malkiya, a closed military zone with entry to those areas prohibited. Hours after striking Beirut's southern suburbs, Israel also struck a mosque in Gaza, killing 19. Also on Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with the military chiefs of Israel's Northern Command to discuss current operations and follow-up goals against Hezbollah in Lebanon, during which he declared that Israel would win the war.
A year ago, we suffered a terrible blow. For the past 12 months, we've been changing reality from end to end. The whole world is astounded at the blows you inflict on our enemies, and I salute you and tell you, you are the generation of victory. Together we will fight, and together we will win, with God's help.
With tensions escalating between Israel and Iran, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant declared all options for retaliation were open against Iran-backed Hezbollah, and also warned Tehran that if it continues to try and harm Israel, it should remember what happened to Gaza and Beirut.
Whoever thinks that by trying to harm Israel they will deter us from reacting, they only need to look at what is happening in Gaza and Beirut.
The comments come as Gallant visited an Israeli Air Force base on Sunday, which was targeted in last Tuesday's barrage of Iranian missiles towards Israel. Over the weekend, tens of thousands of protesters around the world took to the streets to call for an end to bloodshed in Gaza and the Middle East as a whole. Around 40,000 pro-Palestine protesters took to the streets in central London, while thousands gathered in Paris, Rome, Manila, Cape Town, and New York City. Protesters also gathered near the White House, calling on the U.S. to end its support for Israel and their military campaigns in Gaza and Lebanon. Yoon, Arirang News.
In related news, a number of grim developments in the brutal fighting between Israel and Hamas this year have fueled rampant fears of a broader regional war. Our Kim Bo-kyung takes a look back.
Over 40,000 deaths and 90% of the Gaza population, amounting to 1.9 million displaced. These are the numbers that are left from the war, with it already being 1 year since the Palestinian militant group Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on Israel from the Gaza Strip. Though devastating it had been throughout the year, experts say there were key dates of the conflict this year that made this war spill into neighboring Lebanon. In May this year, U.S. President Joe Biden called on Hamas to accept a ceasefire proposal of 3 phases, backed by other countries such as Qatar and Egypt. In July, however, as Fuad Shukr, known to have been the right-hand man of Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, got killed in an Israeli airstrike, and the head of the political bureau of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, died after having attended the swearing-in of Iranian president, ceasefire talks lost momentum. In September, Israel confirmed the deaths of 6 hostages found in the tunnel complex under Gaza, sparking protests across Israel with anger directed at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet for failing to secure a hostage deal. One expert says this, in part, led to Netanyahu reaffirming his will to wipe out Hamas and weaken Hezbollah for the sake of his political career and to end the war.
Ever since the war began on October 7th, Israel's 2 goals were to wipe out Hamas and save hostages. And for that, it is necessary to target Hezbollah to some extent, as they have helped Hamas to have force. That is why military operations are currently being carried out in southern Lebanon aimed at weakening Hezbollah.
Given that Israel targeted Hamas and Hezbollah are Iran-backed, concerns are mounting about whether the conflict would lead to a full-fledged war between Israel and Iran. Experts say Iran would not be willing to engage in an all-out war, as it does not have the capability to do so, making it Israel's call.
Israel is expected to retaliate. The intensity of it and to what extent Iran can withstand would be a critical factor. This period of time, right until the US presidential election, is the optimal period for Israel, as once the elections are over and a new president is elected, there may be more pressure against Israel, limiting its room to maneuver.
Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
And amid the brutal fighting between Israel and Hezbollah, some 100 South Koreans in Lebanon returned home this past weekend on a military plane. Our foreign affairs correspondent Peunji has details.
A military transport aircraft carrying 97 evacuees from Lebanon lands at an airbase in Seongnam, south of Seoul. A sense of relief was visible on the faces of those returning as they disembarked the plane on Saturday, greeted by their families. Kim So-kyung, who returned home with her 2 young daughters, said she's grateful to be alive.
We couldn't sleep at night because our house was shaken from the bombing. We're so grateful the government sent us a transport plane.
The KC-330 aircraft left Lebanon's capital on Friday afternoon, carrying the evacuees, including 96 South Korean nationals and 1 Lebanese national, a family member of a South Korean citizen. The C-130J transport plane, capable of operating on shorter runways and under fire, was also sent as a backup. A foreign ministry official who led the operation explained that he could tell the situation in Lebanon was serious, saying a cloud of smoke was seen near the Beirut airport.
There was black smoke behind the bus carrying our citizens, not too far from the airport.
Meanwhile, 30 South Koreans have reportedly decided to stay in Lebanon, and the government said it'll take necessary measures to ensure their safety. South Korean diplomats, including the country's ambassador to Lebanon, also remain in Lebanon. The evacuation plan comes as the conflict between Israel and the Hezbollah militant group continues to escalate, making it increasingly difficult for those living in Lebanon to leave the country on commercial flights. 배은지, Arirang News.
North Korea and China mark their 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations with pledges to bolster bilateral ties. Now, one scholar here in Seoul believes there is a subtle but tangible discrepancy in the tone of the respective messages shared by their top diplomats. Our correspondent Kim Jung-sil explains.
The foreign ministers of China and North Korea sent each other what appeared to be follow-up messages to those delivered by their leaders on Sunday, commemorating the 75th year since the establishment of diplomatic relations between Beijing and Pyongyang. The Korean Central News Agency reported on Monday that Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee sent a congratulatory message to her Chinese counterpart Wang Yi to mark the occasion. Choi highlighted the close political, economic, and cultural cooperation between Pyongyang and Beijing over the past 75 years. She also emphasized that despite the complex and multifaceted current international landscape, strengthening the North Korea-China friendship and advancing the socialist cause remains a crucial task for both sides. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi responded by saying that the bilateral relationship has entered a new historical phase under the leadership of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Wang added that safeguarding and developing the relationship is a steadfast priority for Beijing. Professor Park Won-gon of Ewha Women's University noticed the differences in the tone of the messages.
In this message, and Choi Sun-hee has implicitly mentioning about to cooperate with China to counter the United States, but China, they haven't mentioned it at all. They are pretty much focused on the bilateral relationship between China and North Korea. So in this short message, we can still see some different worldview that are represented by both countries.
The KCNA earlier reported congratulatory messages exchanged between Kim and Xi, although there haven't been any signs of large-scale celebrations or exchanges.
They haven't mentioned about any kind of summit between Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un at all. This is one of the signs or evidence that the uncomfortability between these two countries.
As the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations unfolds, the dynamics between China and North Korea is something for Seoul to monitor closely. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Here in South Korea, a fresh public warning was issued earlier on this Monday against North Korea's waste-carrying balloons. The Joint Chiefs of Staff here called on residents in the Greater Seoul region to take caution as the latest round of balloons look to disrupt early morning commute. Members of the public were also reminded against coming into direct contact with the fallen debris and to promptly alert relevant authorities instead. Over 5,000 balloons have been floated into South Korea by North Korea since May this year. In other news, the Education Ministry is offering conditional approval to leaves of academic absences handed in by Korea's medical students. According to the ministry this past Sunday, the leaves of absences will be approved if students share their intention to return to school by March next year and pledge not to partake in collective action against the government's healthcare reform plan. Those who fail to return next March may face disciplinary action, including expulsion. The medical community, for its part, has condemned the ministry's measure, calling it, quote, hasty and unconstitutional. Meanwhile, in the city of Suwon in Gyeonggi-do province this past weekend, an annual festival at its Hwaseong fortress sought to celebrate Joseon-era culture. Our An Sung-jin was there.
Where the past meets the present. The Suwon Hwaseong Cultural Festival is an annual festival held around Suwon Hwaseong Fortress, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was constructed by King Cheongjo, the 22nd king of the Joseon dynasty, to guard the tomb of his father. The festival aims to connect the traces of the Joseon dynasty and the filial piety of King Cheongjo through various activities, including storytelling performances.
I got to know about why King Jongjo constructed this fortress, and the storytelling performance taught us about the royal kitchen and the banquet.
One of the programs offers a royal gourmet experience and a chance to make and taste the traditional Korean desserts that King Jongjo enjoyed, such as tashik, a cookie made by kneading grain powder with honey.
Oh, first, I was really impressed with the story about the king and how his father was dead. So I was really interested and also the dessert for me was very special. How delicate they made it, even though.
The festival combines performances such as traditional Korean opera, theatrical storytelling, and the highlight of the festival, King Jongjo's Royal Parade, which starts in Seoul and ends at Hwaseong Fortress. The 50-kilometer walk spans across 6 cities and seeks to remember Jongjo's thoughts for his people and ambition to strengthen the country. Through these reenactments and interpretations of the past, the festival looks to bring the fortress to life.
King Jongjo had dreamed of a global city, and through this global cultural festival, we look to move forward as an international city, a city that embodies the various stories King Jongjo and the history holds.
Alongside the festival, a media art performance is showcased under the theme King Jongjo's Dream Comes Back to Life in Lights. Though the Suwon Hwaseong Cultural Festival only lasts for 3 days, the National Heritage Media Art will be on display until October 20th, giving a modern twist to the historical heritage. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
On the K-pop front, boy band Stray Kids' mini album 8 ranks 4th on the list of best-selling albums over in the US, according to the group's agency, JYP Entertainment. As of September 30th, 8 ranked just behind albums by Taylor Swift, Travis Scott and Billie Eilish. It is also reportedly the best-selling K-pop album in the US thus far this year. The album topped the US Billboard 200 chart and Belgium's Ultra Top Album Top 200 following its release on July 19th.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. We begin today in Pakistan, where an oil tanker exploded outside Jinnah International Airport in Karachi on Sunday night, killing at least 2 people and injuring some 10 others. Local broadcaster Geo News reported that at least 1 foreigner was among the injured, while the rest of the casualties included security guards, rangers and the police, as well as 3 civilians. According to the Sindh province's Home Minister, Zia-ul Hassan Lanjar, the explosion near the country's largest airport is likely to be an improvised explosive device strike, in other words, a terror attack, while officials have not yet confirmed the nature of the blast. However, in a statement emailed to journalists, the Baluchistan Liberation Army, an armed rebel group, claimed responsibility for the explosion, saying that they were targeting Chinese nationals with a vehicle laden with an IED. According to witnesses and CCTV footage, the explosion also destroyed 3 cars and 4 motorcycles. Pakistan's Dawn News said that flights have not been affected by the incident. The death toll in central Bosnia-Herzegovina, where flash floods and landslides swept away towns and villages, increased to at least 18 on Sunday after heavy rain hit the region. Search and rescue teams from Serbia, Croatia, the North Macedonia worked through the weekend to remove piles of debris, while searching for around a dozen people who remain unaccounted for. The deadliest floods in years hit the Jablanica region southwest of the capital Sarajevo on Friday, causing sudden floods that swept into people's homes as they slept. Bridges, roads and railway tracks were submerged or damaged as riverbanks burst, while communications and electricity supplies were also affected. A Royal New Zealand Navy ship ran aground and sank off Samoa's coast on Saturday, becoming the first ship the country's naval forces lost at sea since World War II. According to New Zealand's Defence Minister, all 75 crew and passengers on board were rescued. A Navy official said the HMNZS Manawanui, a specialist dive and hydrographic vessel, was conducting a survey of a reef when it ran aground just 1 nautical mile from the southern coast of the island of Upolu. The ship reportedly caught fire before capsizing, while officials said the cause of the incident is under investigation. The 189th Munich Oktoberfest came to an end on Sunday after the world's largest beer festival attracted some 6.7 million visitors to the city. According to official figures, around 7 million 1-liter mugs of beer were sold during this year's 2-week-long party in the Bavarian capital, down from 7.2 million mugs sold last year. Police said crime rates also fell during this year's Oktoberfest, down by 25.8% compared to 2023, despite the event's reputation for being rowdy. And the removal of 98,000 heavy beer glass mugs from beer tents, something that revelers tried to take as souvenirs, was successfully prevented, with confiscated mugs returned to their owners. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
With the influx of rain clouds left by Typhoon Kraton, rain continued everywhere today, with cool autumn weather continuing in central areas such as Seoul, the southern part of country, and Jeju Island are seeing sporadic rain. Tomorrow there will be up to 30 millimeters of rain in eastern parts of Gangwon-do province and 5 to 10 in the Gyeongsang-do province and Jeju Island. Typical autumn weather with large daily temperature differences. It's going to be cool in the middle of the day tomorrow. Temperatures will continue to be similar to the average for the time of year, and the weather will stay cool throughout the week. Tomorrow morning will start at 13 degrees in Seoul and Daejeon, Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju, 14 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 24 in Seoul, Daejeon, and Daegu, Busan, 25 degrees. It will be sunny in inland areas on Wednesday, but it will continue to rain on Jeju Island and eastern parts of Gangwon-do province. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our new panel session with members of the press as well as pundits.
This time.
I'm your host, Gina Kim.
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama. A story of us where hope and despair coexist. Fun and refreshingly satisfying. K-dramas carry warmth and move people's hearts. Meet the fascinating stories of Korea through K-dramas.
Children's laughter, hope, dream. K-animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends between everyday life and dream. Surprising spectacle where imagination becomes real. An array of subjects catering from infants to adolescents. For our story to reach all corners of the world. K-animation makes healthy laughter for children.
Laos is hosting this year's ASEAN Summit as well as the broader interactions with its dialogue partners, including South Korea this week. And President Yoon Suk-yeol is poised to attend the latest event to place emphasis on nuclear disarmament by North Korea for regional prosperity. On this first edition of Press Perspective, we touch upon the foreign media coverage of the ASEAN-related meetings and more. Hello and welcome to our first edition of Press Perspective, a daily panel session with members of the press as well as pundits on issues of interest largely pertaining to South Korea and its surrounding region. Today, that is Monday, October 7th, we touch upon the Yoon administration's latest diplomatic efforts as the 2024 ASEAN summits kick off in Laos this week. For more, I have Andres Sanchez-Brown, a correspondent for Spanish news agency EFE Spain, who is currently based here in South Korea. Andres, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us here. It's a real pleasure.
Right. I also have Adita Kitikun, a senior partner at RDK Group, a marketing and media firm based in Laos. Adita, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Right, Adita, the plenary session of this year's ASEAN Summit will take place on the 9th of October. That is this coming Wednesday. And before we delve into the agenda ahead, let's begin with a few words about this organization of Southeast Asian nations and its broad objectives.
Absolutely. Thank you. So ASEAN, let me kind of spell it out for you guys, stands for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It was founded in 1967 with about 5 original members. There was Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. And over time, it's kind of expanded to include 10 members, representing over 600 million people. And also some of the world's fastest growing economies, might I add. So the primary goals of ASEAN are to kind of foster economic growth, maintain regional peace and stability, and promote social progress across its member states. Now, importantly, and also somewhat controversially, ASEAN kind of operates on these 2 principles of non-interference and consensus building, which has kind of allowed it to navigate this really, really diverse, really exceptionally diverse set of political systems and kind of maintain this unity amidst this diversity. So this unity is anchored through 3 main pillars. So there's the ASEAN political security community, the economic community, and the socio-cultural community. Now together, these pillars kind of address everything under the sun, from regional security to economic integration and social development. yeah, so I think that should be a nice kind of overview of ASEAN.
Right, Aditya. And what do you suppose is the significance of Laos hosting the ASEAN and its broader summits this year?
Good question. So Laos hosting the ASEAN summit this year, I believe this is the third time that we're hosting it. It's actually quite a big deal. So as one of the smaller economies in ASEAN, we're only a population of about 7 million. We're kind of in this, how do you say, a unique position to showcase our growing diplomatic role in the region. So in recent years, Laos has worked closely with China, particularly through infrastructure projects like the China-Laos Railway, which is part of China's broader Belt and Road Initiative. And so this infrastructure is kind of transforming Laos from a landlocked nation into a land-linked hub in the region. So that's the purpose, is to kind of offer this better connectivity and trade routes to its neighbors. Now, secondly, this is probably the most important thing, hosting the summit allows Laos as a nation to assert itself as a neutral venue for complex regional discussions. As I said earlier, that our ASEAN is filled with politically diverse countries, diverse systems. And so given the geopolitical complexity surrounding issues like the South China Sea, Myanmar, etc., Laos can kind of serve as a middle ground where kind of member states can kind of hack it out, and where they feel comfortable discussing both sensitive political topics and opportunities for cooperation. It's particularly apt because this year's theme is enhancing connectivity and resilience. And it's really, really fitting for Laos because it aims to position itself, like we aim to position ourselves rather, as a regional player in sustainable development and climate change and other topics on the agenda.
Right, and speaking about the agenda, I'm assuming then climate change and sensitive political issues perhaps are on the agenda at this year's ASEAN summit, Aditya?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess before I kind of give you guys a list or an overview of the agenda, a lot of the ASEAN meetings are spent talking about standards. I mean, we're trying to build this ASEAN community, right, with a very eclectic bunch of super politically diverse states. And so a lot of that is just talking about how to talk about to each other. And yes, the formal language is English, and people understand each other. But there's a how do you say, an underlying language that's kind of there's this barrier between all 10. And so also back to the agenda. There's going to be a heavier focus on, I'd say, food security and energy security, both of which have become even more urgent due to the ongoing global challenges that kind of stem from climate change and, of course, geopolitical tensions like the conflict in Ukraine. The ASEAN leaders will kind of likely discuss ways to kind of strengthen intra-regional trade as well to buffer against global supply chain disruptions. Another thing is climate change, obviously. So ASEAN is particularly vulnerable, as I'm sure you've covered in your TV network, to natural disasters, typhoons, floods, and climate change kind of really amplifies these risks. So ASEAN nations are looking to invest more in green technologies and renewable energy sources. We're trying to kind of foster this sustainable growth that reduces carbon emissions. Laos, for example, has this ambition of becoming the battery of Southeast Asia. We're trying to harness our hydropower potential, of which South Korea is a big investor. We're trying to supply clean energy to its neighbors. And lastly, I would say security. Security is also a critical issue. So the situation in Myanmar, it'll be a very, very, very delicate and sensitive topic. There will likely be a call for more cooperation on regional security issues, including, so apart from Myanmar, we have transnational crime, human trafficking, territorial disputes like those I had mentioned earlier about the South China Sea. And so we'll see ASEAN kind of pushing for closer economic integration under, what's the name of our blueprint, the ASEAN 2025 blueprint, with an emphasis on digitalization, infrastructure development, and also building resilience against global economic shocks.
Right. And those, of course, are the issues on the agenda at this year's ASEAN Summit. And following their talks, ASEAN members will partake in broader dialogue with their regional partners, including South Korea, Andres. And President Yoon Suk-yeol is poised to sit down with his ASEAN counterparts on Thursday. That would be October 10th. What can you tell us about the partnership between South Korea and the ASEAN?
Well, Sunny, this meeting actually comes at a very good timing. Both on the symbolical and on a more tangible front. Symbolical because this year marks the 35th anniversary of the first ever Korea-ASEAN diplomatic meeting. It's been a long road. And on the more tangible aspect, both sides are actually working to sign what is called a comprehensive strategic partnership, which is the highest hierarchy in terms of diplomatic ties with ASEAN. I would say there's been some key moments in the past in terms of policy towards ASEAN countries that are important to underline. I think one was the previous government's, the Moon Jae-in government's new Southern policy, because that policy was the first regional focused policy towards ASEAN countries that was ever drafted in Seoul. And then after that, there's President Yoon's Indo-Pacific strategy that was showcased for the first time in 2022. And that policy, as we know, has Southeastern Asian countries at its core. And then on top of that, the Yoon government did actually present the Korean ASEAN the KASI, the Solidarity Initiative, which basically doubles Korea's contribution to ASEAN cooperation funds. And in that sense, this KASI policy actually, I think, is quite important because it's helped, I'd say, give some armor to ASEAN-focused policy in regards to future government changes, maybe shifts in diplomatic policy. And it's also made sure that cooperation with the ASEAN region is more genuinely focused on economic, social, cultural aspects, and not only, for example, in security issues. So all in all, very important. If you ask me, you know, viewers might be asking what kind of weight does ASEAN have in diplomatic terms for Korea? Well, if you look at the numbers, ASEAN countries as a bloc actually are Korea's second largest trading partner, the second largest destination when it comes to overseas investment from Korea. There's around, I believe, around 300,000 Koreans living in ASEAN countries, and ASEAN nationals actually constitute the second largest foreign resident community in Korea. So, you know, all in all, a very necessary upgrade in diplomatic relations, and one that shows once again that Korea wants to play a more pivotal role in both in regional and global issues.
Right, and perhaps expanding on what Andres has just said, Adita, earlier this year, a presidential advisor speaking within his capacity as a scholar claimed that the ASEAN is Korea's lifeline, while highlighting the need for a more realistic approach to advancing relations with the region. What do you suppose is the feasibility of this particular endeavor?
I think it's highly feasible. Yeah, I mean, actually, I think it's actually essential. As my colleague Andres has said, ASEAN is South Korea's second largest trading partner as a bloc, and South Korea has been actively pursuing stronger ties through its new Southern Policy Plus, which focuses kind of on several key areas of digitalization, sustainable development, public health, all of kind of which resonate with ASEAN's own goals for regional development. So there's potential synergy there. I think what makes this approach realistic, or feasible rather, is that South Korea isn't pushing for grand geopolitical shifts. Rather, it's kind of focusing on practical areas of cooperation. So, for example, South Korea is a leader in digital tech, and ASEAN has this really young and tech-savvy population that's trying to, make a name for themselves. And it's an ideal market for kind of Korean innovations in areas like e-commerce, digital payments, smart city solutions, and so on and so forth. In the realm of public health, COVID-19 kind of showed us that, countries need strong healthcare systems, and South Korea's expertise in this area could kind of help ASEAN countries bolster their own infrastructures. South Korea's interest in green technologies kind of aligns well with ASEAN's push for our renewable energy and climate resilience policies. I think we need to focus on these mutually beneficial areas. And I think South Korea is likely to deepen its economic and political ties with ASEAN. And hopefully that kind of creates this partnership that will be critical for both regions moving forward.
Right. And speaking about moving forward, Andres, the ASEAN +3 summit, including South Korea, Japan and China, will also take place on Thursday, October 10th. What issues do you believe are likely to top talks during this particular summit?
Well, Blue House officials have said that President Yoon will actually present a series of very concrete areas where he would like to enhance cooperation between the ASEAN countries and the +3, that is Korea, Japan, and China. So as far as we know, there seems to be interest on Seoul sides on increasing cooperation, for example, in terms of politics, military exchanges, cybersecurity, environmental issues, as well as the talk of possible creation of safety nets for economic crises. So we could expect some of these issues being touched on the ASEAN +3 meetings. Also, one of them could be the importance of, as Adita was mentioning, one of the pillars of ASEAN is the importance of maintaining regional peace and stability. And of course, one of the +3 members is China, which has a bit of a thorny relation with some ASEAN members, as the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, countries where, they have territorial disputes, especially in the South China Sea areas. This, of course, is a very sensitive issue, and ASEAN sometimes has struggled to show some unity in these terms. But once again, this is very sensitive. There's the principle of not intervening and respecting each other's internal political systems. But who knows? Once the meeting's over, maybe we'll hear a little bit about this.
Right, maybe, hopefully. And beyond these broader regional gatherings, Adita, on the bilateral front, what are some of these shared interests between South Korea and Laos, which you did touch upon earlier on as well?
Yeah, shared interests on the bilateral front. So I'd say there are two. So South Korea and Laos have a lot in common. Particularly in the areas of, I'd say, infrastructure and sustainable development. So South Korean companies have been involved in hydropower projects in Laos, which is kind of key to our pitching ourselves as the battery of Southeast Asia pitch. And hydropower is really central to our economic strategy. And so as the country exports clean energy to its neighbors, including Thailand and Vietnam, and we have plans to export it to, to Singapore and Malaysia as well. So South Korean firms really have also invested in road infrastructure, which is really critical for a landlocked country like Laos that depends heavily on kind of improving its connectivity to kind of be land linked. I'd say both countries are also interested in expanding their cooperation in digital connectivity, which South Korea is quite strong at, and also tourism. South Korea is a major source of tourists for Laos, and with our growing tourism sector, we're always looking for opportunities for further collaboration. We're also trying to rebuild our tourism industry post-pandemic. Both countries would share an interest in promoting green growth. We've been focusing on conservation and sustainable development, and South Korea, with its technological expertise, could kind of play this significant role, I think, in supporting those initiatives. Renewable energy, sustainable urban planning, I'd say. Yeah.
Right. And staying with bilateral relations, Andres, President Yoon Suk-yeol is poised to meet with his Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba on the sidelines of the ASEAN meetings. What are your prospects regarding Seoul-Tokyo ties under the new Japanese leadership?
Well, I think all in all, I'd say the prospects are good. We've heard positive things in that respect in Korea and Japanese media. Ishiba Shigeru is actually viewed as you could say a progressive, he shares a progressive view in terms of historical issues that have been a setback for Korea-Japan relations in the past. Definitely, he is a progressive, I could say. If you compare him to other potential candidates that could have actually taken the role of prime minister, like Takaichi Sanae, who was way more conservative. But yes, he's expressed discomfort, for example, on things like visiting the infamous Yasukuni shrine in Tokyo. He's acknowledged that Japan had a brutal role when it colonized Korea and other countries in Asia. He's actually said that Japan should keep apologizing. And in that sense, I think it's unlikely that we'll see, at least from the government for now, from the Japanese government, any missteps in that particular issue. And I think that we might even see some corresponding gestures from the Ishiba government, especially given how many people see that President Yoon compromised a lot when dealing with ex-Prime Minister Kishida Fumio, right? The fact also that Ishiba used to be a defense minister, and he has a very defense-focused view on things, might actually help, for example, enhancing cooperation on military terms with dealing with North Korea. On the other hand, some analysts actually said that, you know, we shouldn't get our hopes up that fast, that he's a bit of an outsider in party terms, and ruling party terms in Japan, that he's a bit of a contradictory politician. But to be honest, I think all in all, we'll probably be seeing more of that revived shuttle diplomacy that we saw between Yoon and Kishida, and hopefully the one in Laos will be the first of many meetings.
Right, and back in Laos then, Adita, come Friday, the East Asia Summit will take place. Now, this latest summit comes against the backdrop of wider armed confrontations in the world. Adita, what are the prospects of a joint statement among the leaders against escalating violence in the Middle East, briefly speaking? Adita, I'm afraid. Right, I think the audio is off.
Yeah,
there you are.
Yeah. So that's going to be a really tricky one, Suni. So ASEAN kind of traditionally operates on this principle of non-interference and also consensus building. So which makes it really difficult for the bloc to take a strong stance on any issue outside the region, particularly when member states have differing geopolitical alliances. And I'm sure you all know what those alliances are. But I mean, there's a but. I mean, given the global impact of conflicts in the Middle East, particularly on energy prices and trade routes, it's possible that ASEAN leaders could issue a statement expressing concern and calling for peace. So the trick is to really get those words right. I mean, the true challenge will be finding consensus. It's like I had said earlier, consensus is at once our strongest feat and also our weakest. So ASEAN members kind of have diverse views on global conflicts, and some may prefer to focus on issues closer to home, such as the situation in Myanmar or the South China Sea. But I mean, because in an increasingly globalized world, it means that kind of the Middle East conflict does affect Southeast Asia indirectly, and it might take a while for those effects to kind of manifest. Rising fuel costs, disruptions in shipping routes, what have you. And so leaders may find common ground, I think, in a carefully worded statement. I think that's what Laos really excels at, is trying to find that carefully worded statement that perhaps makes everyone happy or equally displeases everyone. And so we're trying to call for a peaceful resolution. We're trying to steer clear of direct involvement, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Ultimately, the statement's gonna kind of reflect our broader goal of maintaining regional stability, economic resilience in the face of global uncertainties. I know you guys won't like that answer, but I think that's the reality we're gonna have to contend with.
Right. Hopefully we'll know at the end of this week then. All right, Aditya, thank you so much for your insights today. And Andres here in the studio, thank you very much for your time and thoughts.
Thanks for having us here.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this first edition of Press Perspective, our daily panel session with members of the press as well as pundits on foreign media headlines covering South Korea and its broader interests. Thank you for watching. We return same time tomorrow.
자연이 빚어낸 선물, 풍기인삼. 2024 경북 영주 풍기인삼 축제. 건강한 에너지를 충전하러 풍기인삼 축제로 오세요. 맛보고 체험하고 온 가족이 함께 즐기는 건강 축제. 특별한 인삼 요리와 함께 면역력을 높이고 활력을 더하세요. 화려한 축하 무대와